Ladies and gentlemen, last night, our esteemed His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa decided to address the nation. This, of course, following the highly successful G20 meetings that had taken place, the highly successful declaration that was signed at the G20, and to send some warnings to those of us who dare to speak the truth of what is actually happening in South Africa. Now, of course, as you can imagine, the media all over the place were covering his little speech and praising him for his absolute statesman-like ability in driving home the points, although very, very long-winded. The speech was about half an hour. It could have been 15 minutes if that man actually knew how to string a sentence together without pausing after every word. It is absolutely torture to listen to that man. So originally, I recorded all of the sections in the video in his speech, and I thought I would show you guys. And then I realized, but I don't want to listen to it again. It is torture to listen to that man speak. So instead, I'm just going to run you through some of his greatest hits, some of the claims that he makes that is just absolutely false, because of course I have to do the job that the media simply will not do, and that is to actually fact check what the hell this man is saying, because, well, he doesn't seem to know. He starts off by praising the businesses in South Africa for doing such a bang-up job, for coming together and bringing other companies from around the world together in order to discuss the business environment in South Africa. This comes, of course, at a time where Anglo-American is actually pulling out of South Africa. Entire steel industries disappearing from South Africa. Business is under severe pressure in our country, and yet Cyril Ramaphosa pretends like it is the business leaders, in fact, that is celebrating South Africa and telling the rest of the world that South Africa is indeed open for business. Next up, of course, Cyril went on to thank the propaganda wing of the ANC, the media, the mainstream media of South Africa, for their incredible coverage of the G20 and keeping the people of South Africa, apprised of everything that is actually happening. But then when you actually look at some of the articles that came out, the media was genuinely doing their job, and I understand why he's thanking them. They were running their disinformation campaigns consistently, and yes, disinformation is the correct word here. Misinformation is when civilians and people in civil society are spreading false information. Disinformation is when government entities are spreading known lies. The media, I consider all of them to be part of the propaganda wing of the ANC, and thus any and all information that the media, that includes Daily Maverick, News 24, City Press, the whole lot of them, every single time that they lie, it is known as disinformation because it is pushing known ANC propaganda. Take a look at this article, for example, on the 22nd of November. News 24 comes up with this glowing article about Ramaphosa's tactical masterstroke, how Ramaphosa managed to completely change the normal format of the G20 to pass the declaration on day one rather than wait until the third day because they were afraid that America might actually start to exercise some weight and get a lot of these other countries to renege on signing that declaration. Now, all of that sounds phenomenal until you realize that there has never been a G20 summit where a leader's declaration wasn't adopted. Like, literally never. Even leaders' summits where the declaration was highly contested and a lot of nations didn't agree with it, the host nation still just adopts it, because that's the whole point. If you're the host nation, you can just go, well, yeah, we agree, and therefore we're going to go do it. So it's nothing new. Literally nothing that Ramaphosa did during this entire G20 summit was anything special. Ramaphosa did the most bare minimum. In fact, when you listen to the start of his speech, he goes through this whole thing of what all the nice things that the world leaders are saying about South Africa. What Cyril Ramaphosa fails to realize, because the man has the mental acuity and intellectual capabilities of a lawn chair, is reading between the lines. Every single world leader praises our hospitality, the friendliness of our people, the service delivery of our people, not of the government. That's what they praise. They don't praise the success of the government. They don't praise the economy of the government. They don't praise the safety and the security of the government. This in spite of the fact that the government spent millions of rands with police officers everywhere where these dignitaries would go to try and keep them safe. None of the world leaders say anything positive about the ANC and their governance, They say things about the South African people, which none of us would disagree with. South Africans are some of the greatest people you will ever meet. If you don't live in South Africa, and I have a sizable community who doesn't, you should come visit. South Africa has phenomenal people, and not everyone is super racist. In fact, most people are super chill and just want to get along. But there is a sizable minority that does want to destroy and basically kill everyone that isn't black. But that's a whole different discussion. And yes, I've been warned by Mr. Ramaphosa that I should not tell you guys the truth about what is actually happening with the Afrikaner community in South Africa. But we'll get to that in a bit. So this was the kind of articles that the media, the hard-hitting journalism that the media was praised for during the G20. Of course, Ramaphosa makes no mention of the actual cost of all of this. He praises the mayors and the premiers of the different provinces for fixing the country. And then, of course, before this, he went on this whole thing of, do you not clean your house before people come to visit? And it's like, yeah, but we also don't allow our homes to fall into disrepair before people arrive. Usually when you're cleaning up for people to come, it's like washing out a mug that you just used to drink coffee. It's not literally fixing walls and fixing tiles and putting in a new carpet because you've allowed everything to go to waste. But we were told, right, at least prior to this in 2024, that this summit is going to cost about 700 million. We're going to find out very soon because Parliament is now asking questions. They want the final tally. What did it actually cost us? Of course, the projections are that Johannesburg made about 3 billion rand from this entire incursion, or excursion, I should say. But I highly doubt it. I think if we actually look at the real numbers, it's going to be basically either a wash or we're going to have lost money. Then Ramaphosa goes on this whole rant of the successes of the G20 in tackling inequality in the country. Ramaphosa blames the inequality in South Africa not on the ANC and their policies. No. Ramaphosa blames it on the universal or the global environment. The fact that fewer companies are investing, the fact that there's been a sort of apprehension to economic growth and business confidence in the world. And this is why South Africa is really struggling. But then you do a little bit of research and you find out in 1994, the Gini coefficient. Now, for those of you who don't know what the Gini coefficient is, it legitimately just tracks inequality in a country. The closer it is to 0, the more equal a country is. The closer it is to 1, the more unequal a country is. 1 would be completely unequal, 0 would be completely equal. In 1994, South Africa has a Gini coefficient of 0.59. In 2025, or 2025, South Africa has a Gini coefficient of 0.6. And if you look across the board from 2006, 2015, 2018, 2025, you look and you see that the ANC has overseen a continued decline in inequality in our nation. But of course, Ramaphosa says that everything is just made worse because of global things. It has nothing to do with the ANC specifically. If you look since 2016, you will see that foreign direct investment into South Africa has been ridiculously low ever since Jacob Zuma came to power. That's been our major problem. And under Cyril Ramaphosa and the GNU, it is now completely collapsing the country over. Why is that? Because of ANC policies, because of things like BE, things like AA, things like EE. That's the entirety of the reason. It has nothing to do with global environments. Why? Because when we look at African nations around the rest of the continent, their foreign direct investment is actually going up. More countries are now looking to other African nations and saying, hey, if you guys can't get your shit together, we'll just invest in these other African nations because they actually do seem to be open for business. Then, of course, he praised the economy of South Africa, saying that we are looking down the barrel of massive economic turnarounds. And the unemployment rate is what he sort of mentioned as a reason to be optimistic about the economy of South Africa. Because yes, unemployment for the first time this year actually fell, and that was in November, or at least for September. What he fails to recognize or say, of course, out loud, is that during September, every single year, year on year, unemployment actually goes down as a lot of businesses are starting to gear up for the tourism season and therefore have to hire more people. A lot of farmers, for example, are also now hiring a lot more seasonal workers because, well, there's work to be done. a lot of businesses are gearing up for the festive season. And so because there's going to be a lot more business and a lot more money spent, there's just a bigger need for people to be employed. This is literally a trend that happens in South Africa every single year. It's nothing special. It doesn't signal anything special. Unless, of course, you're arguing that for the last 25 years in South Africa, because that's how long the trend has held, that this is just sort of, we've been gearing up for this big economic development boom for 25 years, which, of course, we all know is just complete nonsense. Finally, he talks about the big victory that they've had for gender-based violence in South Africa and declaring gender-based violence and femicide as national disasters, and that this is going to allow them to do a hell of a lot more. I have no problem with that. I don't think that women should be abused. I think that women and children specifically should be protected in every single society. This is why I am fiercely anti-abortion and why I believe in marriage, because the greatest antidote to female abuse and to female violence would be good, healthy, strong Christian marriages. That's the whole point of them. But of course, not for our government. Our government makes a big hoo-ha about all of the dangers that women face in our society. The problem, of course, is that if you're a man, you're about 5 times more likely to experience violence in our country than any woman ever. 87% of all homicide victims are male. So where exactly is the outrage for the men in this country? Where is the national disaster on crime in this country? That, by the way, is one of the things that Donald Trump had a problem with, Cyril Ramaphosa, the genocide on the Afrikaner community, because when we look at murder in this country, it is ridiculously high. South Africa is one of the most dangerous countries in the world. Just this morning, Ronaldo Gous did a video on this, showing how South Africa is worse in terms of criminality than war-torn countries and war zones. That's how bad things are. But when you look at the murders in South Africa, you look at Afrikaner communities in the sort of farming landscapes, and they experience murder at a rate of 3 times greater than the average person in South Africa, and it's on par. Actually, it's slightly higher. If you live in the Cape Flats, your chances of getting murdered is about 100 out of 100,000. That means 100 people are dying for every 100,000 people that live there. If you're a farmer in South Africa, it is 108 out of 100,000. So it's more dangerous to be a farmer in South Africa than what it is to be living in a gang area like the Cape Flats and Mitchell's Plain. So there's a serious criminality problem, and certain sectors of our society is targeted way more than others. But of course, we have gender-based violence. That's the national disaster. Not violence, not the fact that we have worse criminality than actual war zones. No. Female, gender-based violence. That's the big one. It's all political theater and nonsense. What we need in this country is an actual police force that enforces the rules, that enforces the laws. I'll give you guys a quick story here, because this genuinely just surprised me the other day. I'm driving down the N2, and there's robots on the N2, which is another problem here in Cape Town, but never mind. So I'm standing on the N2, and the traffic light is red. So I come to a stop. Just on the opposite side, on the cars going the other way, there's a speed cop. Literally just a traffic cop, for those of you who isn't from South Africa, but there's a speed cop right there, right? And this taxi comes flying over the red light. I mean, flying way past the speed limit. The speed limit there on the N2 is about 80 kilometers. This guy is going at least 100, 110, right over the traffic light. Guess what the traffic officer does? Nothing. Just goes on his way. It's not his problem. He's not going to inconvenience himself. That is the problem in South Africa. We have the laws, but we have no one that actually enforces the laws. We don't need a national disaster being declared for female-based violence. We just need a police service that actually prosecutes and catches the criminals that are committing the crimes. Finally, he harps on about climate change. Now, climate change is such a bad thing, and this whole G20 was about switching all African nations over to a greener economy. This, by the way, as Bill Gates, the arguable disciple of the green scare tactic in the world for the last few decades, has finally come out and said, okay, well, actually, climate change isn't going to lead to the demise of mankind. we're fine, right? Because most of the science in climate change is now being revealed to be flawed and false. A lot of the findings for a lot of these papers weren't actually done with real, actual data, but rather with model data that they would supplement because the real data wasn't actually showing the real reality of what is happening on the ground. Because when you actually look at global temperatures, they are not going up. When you actually look at global ocean temperatures, turns out they're not actually going up because they might rise in some areas, but then they go down in others. So the national average or the international average remains exactly the same. So people like Bill Gates, who have made it his mission to scare every single young person with an underdeveloped prefrontal cortex into submission, are now having to sort of reevaluate where he stands. But of course, Cyril Ramaphosa goes on and on about how we need an industrial revolution, and the G20 have accepted that South Africa needs an industrial revolution, but also a green energy revolution. And so I thought, okay, let's just quickly look at the Europeans' GDP growth rate since they've adopted the asinine policies of green energy. So they adopted for the first time in 2009. You see a massive GDP hit in 2009. That's not because of green energy. That's because of global financial crisis. But since then, what you find in Europe is outside of the recovery period following COVID, the European Union has never again been able to reach the highs of their economic growth prior to adopting green energy. And as you can see here, it's actually starting to go down. It's actually starting to collapse. They will soon be at a sort of deflationary position. When you look at energy prices in Europe since 2009, you start to see a significant climb from about 2009. You can look there. It starts to significantly incline, and it is simply not stopping. And we know that thanks to a lot of the countries that have already swapped completely and wholly over to green, every single time a country gets, the closer it gets to 100% green energy, the more expensive electricity becomes, and eventually you reach a point where electricity is between 3 and 5 times higher than what it was before you sort of reached maximum penetration of your economy. So where's this industrial revolution going to come from? In order to industrialize, you need energy. In order to create energy, you need something that actually provides energy, something like nuclear, something like coal, something like gas. South Africa has that in abundance. We have crazy amounts of uranium. We could be building nuclear power plants by the dozens, and that would actually accomplish the set up goal. But of course, that's not the point. That's not what Cyril Ramaphosa is going on about. And then finally, Cyril Ramaphosa decides to turn his attention to people like myself, people like AfriForum, or organizations like AfriForum, those of us who are calling out the ANC, exposing their lies to the rest of the world, and saying to the rest of the world, hey, we have a problem in this country with massive inequality, yes, but we also have a problem of persecution. We have a problem of a white population that is consistently blamed for every single thing that goes wrong. We have a problem with a government that is begging the rest of the world to fix their problems for them because they refuse to take responsibility for the problems that they themselves have created. To this, Cyril Ramaphosa says that it is false that the ANC is taking anyone's farms from them. This, of course, is just a blatant lie. There's literally a case right now being heard in court of the ANC taking a farm without wanting to pay for it. In the case of all previous expropriations, people like to say, well, they were paid for it. Yes, they were paid for it after being forced to sell. A lot of those farmers, and I know because I know a lot of farmers that were forced to sell their land, didn't want to sell, but they were effectively told, if you don't sell to us at a reasonable price that we agree on, we're just going to make a price and then we're going to force you to sell. So you're effectively told either you sell to us now or you can, give it to us later at a much reduced price. But we're getting this farm. So that's still expropriation. It's just a little bit of compensation on the back end so that you don't feel completely cheated. And now they want to remove the compensation as well. We've already done the whole genocide claim thing. I've shown you the numbers. I've shown you the statistics. Being a white farmer in South Africa is the most dangerous job in the whole of South Africa, statistically proven. I've done those videos. I've shown you those numbers. So Cyril Ramaphosa, of course, using the language that he is, because he spends the last bit of his video warning those of us like myself, like organizations like AfriForum and Solidarity, that we should stop spreading the misinformation. And that, yes, South Africa is a nation of dialogue, but we're also a nation we're a constitutional republic. And as a result of that, or a constitutional democracy, and as a result of that, there are laws and rules that we must follow. This is the language of a dictatorship. This is a language of a government that is getting ready to lock people up who say things that the government does not like. It is bad. And it's probably going to get a hell of a lot worse. To anyone who is sitting there saying this is AfriForum's fault, and it's because of AfriForum that we're being punished by the Americans, I want you to take a good hard look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, would the Americans, the nation with the biggest intelligence network in the world, would they risk losing a strategic partner in Africa over some organizations saying so? I think you're out of your mind. The fact that the United States have not reneged, they have not gone back on their story, they continue to stick to their guns, tells you that they have information that the ANC does not want the world to know about. That is why the ANC is trying to ban people from speaking about it. That is why the media is trying to drag every single person that is trying to bring it up. Why? Because whenever you have a psyop, whenever you have a lie that you want to sell to the people, the last thing you need is someone saying, hey, that's a lie. That is our problem in South Africa. But of course, that's just my opinion. Let me know in the comment section down below how you feel about it. I know this video was incredibly long, but there was a lot of stuff I needed to get through. So please let me know in the comment section down below if you are still watching, and just write the word smash in the comment section for, in remembrance of the smashing and thrashing we gave the Welsh over the weekend. Very proud of the boys. Massive shout out and thank you to all of the patrons as well as the YouTube channel members for continuing to support this channel. To become a patron, link in the description down below, or join button right below this video for YouTube members. Then, of course, if you want to see more people have access to the content that I make and you like the content that I make, please consider hitting that like button, hitting that subscribe button, and also sharing this video around with as many people as possible. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.